It's a quiet evening again, and your thoughts drift to an old street in Pennsylvania, where the hours once ticked a little too softly. In the city of Allentown, nestled between the rustling trees and iron-fenced yards of the East Hamilton district, there stands a narrow, three-story row house with ivy climbing its brick facade. For years, it belonged to a man named Walter Ives, a reclusive clockmaker with an unmatched reputation for precision. Walter's shop occupied the front parlor of the house. It had no sign, no open hours. But those who were referred by friends or by whispered recommendations would knock gently and be invited inside, where the smell of oil and wood polish filled the air. He was known for repairing anything that ticked: antique mantel clocks, pocket watches, wall pendulums. He preferred the old ones, the mechanical kind, the ones with parts that could be coaxed back to life with just the right tension, just the right rhythm. People said Walter had a way of listening to broken things. But sometime in the spring of 1951, Walter vanished. There was no dramatic exit, no goodbye. One day, a neighbor noticed the curtains hadn't moved in several days. The next, the mail began to pile up. A few concerned friends alerted the police. When they entered the house, they found everything in perfect order. The workshop was still tidy, tools laid out in neat rows, a teacup beside a folded newspaper, and a pocket watch mid-repair on the bench. All the clocks in the house were ticking, every one of them, even the ones that hadn't worked in years according to their owners. Some of them hadn't even been repaired yet. The officers found no signs of foul play, no forced entry, nothing missing. Just one curious detail. On the wall in the hallway leading to the back garden, someone had written, very faintly, in chalk, "When the clocks stop, I will return." Walter's bank account was untouched, his bicycle still chained beside the kitchen door. A pot of tea, long since cold, still sat on the stovetop. Weeks passed, then months. An official missing persons case was opened, but nothing came of it. The house remained in the care of the city for a time. Eventually, it was sold, and the new owner, a young woman named Lorraine Winters, moved in and began to renovate. She kept the clocks, finding their endless ticking oddly comforting. Until one night in late September, when all of them stopped at once. It happened just after 2:43 a.m. Lorraine remembered the time exactly, because she had awoken to the sudden silence. She rose, confused by the stillness, and walked down to the parlor. Nothing had fallen, nothing was broken. Just silence. She didn't see anyone. The doors were locked, the windows shut. But on the same hallway wall, bare and repainted, a new message had appeared beneath the wallpaper she had recently peeled away. "Don't forget to wind the hallway clock." There was no hallway clock. Not yet. But when Lorraine returned to the parlor, she noticed something she hadn't seen before: an empty hook above the fireplace, where dust outlined the shape of a missing timepiece. And suddenly, she began to wonder, was Walter ever gone at all? Or had he simply slipped behind the hour hand, waiting? You listen closely now, as the house on Hamilton Street continues to tick, though not everything inside it follows the ordinary passage of time. After the clocks all stopped that night at 2:43 a.m., Lorraine Winters began keeping a journal. Not out of fear. She wasn't frightened, At least, not exactly. But there was something about the stillness that felt too deliberate, as if silence itself had been chosen. In her journal, she described soft creaks in the floorboards that didn't match her steps, the faint sound of a ticking clock when none were running, and once, just once, the feeling that she'd walked through a pocket of air colder than the rest of the house, like passing briefly through a shadow. She brought in a local antiques expert to assess the old timepieces left behind by Walter Ives. The expert, a soft-spoken man named Mr. Delaney, examined each one carefully. "These shouldn't be working," he said, tapping the inside of a wooden mantel clock. "This spring is too worn. This gear's misaligned." Yet, they ticked. He paused before the largest piece in the room, a tall grandfather clock with no faceplate. "Where's the dial?" he asked. Lorraine blinked. She'd never noticed. "It's been like that since I've moved in," she said. "Strange," he murmured. "No numbers, no hands, just sound." And indeed, the empty-faced clock had continued to tick for weeks after Walter vanished, until the night everything stopped. Delaney traced the carvings on its sides, delicate vines, tiny figures, hand-etched. One carving showed a man sitting alone at a workbench. Another showed him standing beside a tree with no leaves, holding a clock. And in the center, almost too small to notice, was a phrase burned into the wood grain. "Time winds back when no one's looking." Lorraine wasn't sure what to make of it. That night, she wound one of the smaller clocks, placed it on her nightstand, and fell asleep to its rhythmic beat. At 2:43 a.m., it stopped again. This time, she woke instantly. The house felt paused, like a theater before the curtain lifts. She crept downstairs and stood in the workshop doorway. The clocks on the bench, silent. The teacup, still where it had always been. But now there was something else. A folded piece of paper had appeared beneath the pocket watch Walter had been repairing when he vanished. She hadn't placed it there. The paper was yellowed, folded in quarters. On it, in fine handwriting, were the words, "The mechanism is sound, but some hours refuse to pass. Keep winding. I am almost through." Lorraine sat in the old chair by the bench. She didn't sleep. In the morning, when the sun finally crept through the ivy-covered windows, she found the hallway again. The wall had changed. Where she'd once seen only peeling paint and a message in chalk, now there was a small indentation in the plaster, precisely shaped to cradle a round clock. The hallway clock. She never remembered buying it, but a week later, a parcel arrived at her doorstep. No postage, no return address. Inside, a simple wooden wall clock. Familiar somehow. Worn at the edges, but otherwise untouched. When she hung it in the hall, it started ticking without being wound. And though she tried to ignore it, the minute had never moved past 2:43. The hour Walter vanished. You stay with the story as it softly unfolds toward its quiet conclusion. Lorraine's life settled into a curious rhythm, measured by the slow, steady tick of the hallway clock. It never moved past 2:43, the same hour Walter had vanished decades before. Yet the clock never stopped. It simply waited. Over time, Lorraine grew less startled by the clock's refusal to move forward. Instead, she began to feel as if it marked something, an invisible threshold between moments, a pause in time itself. She spoke with local historians and longtime neighbors. Some recalled Walter Ives as a man deeply fascinated with time beyond mere hours. interested in its patterns, its hidden gears. One elderly neighbor, Mrs. Pritchard, shared a memory. Walter once told me that clocks were more than just machines. They were keepers of stories, and sometimes they held secrets better left unheard. Lorraine also found an old journal hidden behind the fireplace bricks, filled with Walter's meticulous notes. Among the usual clockmaking sketches and parts lists was a passage that stood out. Time is a circle that sometimes stops to listen. When it does, those who pay attention may find the moments that slipped away. She came to believe Walter never truly left the house. Instead, he became part of its quiet heartbeat, a present winding time from behind the walls. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the window, Lorraine heard a faint whisper near the hallway clock. It was the sound like the turning of a key. She looked closely. The clock face shimmered faintly, and for a moment, the minute hand trembled, just a fraction. And then, as the seconds passed, the clock began to tick forward again. Not in haste, not in alarm, but slowly, carefully, like a breath held for years being released. Lorraine smiled softly. Somewhere inside that house, Walter's story was still being told. Not in words, but in the steady rhythm of time itself. And for now, that was enough. If this story meant something to you, or just helped you unwind for a bit, a like or comment goes a long way. And if you want more, subscribing makes sure you won't miss the next one. Thanks for being here.